Welcome back, guys. It's that time again. We are going into the Streets of New Capenna launch. We're actually doing paper for the first time. So if you guys are seeing this the day it comes out on the 22nd, in a little less than a week, you guys will be doing paper pre-releases at your local stores. And on the 28th, we have the release of Streets of New Capenna on Arena. So about 2 weeks before. These paper articles will be up shortly before then as well. But as always, we have Yanks on the call. We're going to be starting with an introduction to Streets of New Capenna. We're going to talk about the different houses that are there, which is basically just new fancy names for the different wedges that are going to be featured in the show or in the set. We're going to talk about the different archetypes and what they're known for, as well as new and old mechanics, and just some speculations about the set as a whole. Also, we will be telling you guys how you guys can get 5 new Streets of New Capenna sleeves for free on your account at the end of the video. So if you guys don't care about set review, fast forward to the end and get some free sleeves. Don't forget. Okay, so first picture, guys, is we're going to just talk about the different houses. This is very gangster 1920s-esque, and all of the cards, which you'll see in a little bit, and in future videos as we do the set review, are sort of, you know, suits and flapper girls and beautiful 1920s, like fantasy style. What is the word for that architecture? It's sort of like futuristic.
It's Art Deco.
Some very Art Deco. Thank you very much. So let's go ahead and talk about the different houses first. We have Obscura, Maestros, Riveters, Cabretti, and Brokers, which is an interesting set of them. So the first one we're going to talk about, guys, is Obscura, which is classically the Esper. That's the word I'm looking for. Gosh, I'm always the worst at this game. This is going to be your typical Esper colors, and they have a bit of an interesting archetype. What do you think of this particular house, Yanks?
Yeah, I mean, Esper traditionally has been kind of very controlling. To be fair, Esper, when it was originally Esper from Shards of Alara, was really an artifact theme shard. But in this case, you're looking at a very controlling archetype, some disruption, some hand disruption, removal, kind of the general things that sort of those colors tend to do, not just in limited, but in constructed as well.
Yeah, so most of, and again, there is a lot of overlap with these, so expect to see recurring themes in multiple houses because they do share 2 out of 3 colors often. But most of the cards in this archetype, especially if it's multicolor, is Yanks's audio might be low. Sorry about that, guys. We'll up that. The theme of this is going to be mostly control, hand disruption. So there's like some creatures that ETB, get a peek at your opponent's hand, things like that. It's also going to have the lion's share of the removal. The black and the white is usually very heavy in the removal area. So that's where you're going to be able to pick up most of those things. And you can see there's also a lot of flyers, which would make sense because we have like sort of the Azorius colors in there as well. And you guys will rate these cards later when we get into the set review as well. So here is one of the cards I was talking about that has some of the more controlling aspects of it. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses a life, you gain a life. This is something we typically see in like Orzhov colors, the black and the white. So we're getting a good mix of all the different classic themes for these archetypes.
Yeah, that's a very Orzhov effect, but obviously blue can certainly draw cards. Plus it's a cephalid, so who else is excited about cephalids coming back?
I was, when we were doing the, picking the cards for these, I was just like, oh my gosh, there's cephalids. And Yanks didn't believe me at first. He's like, no, there can't be.
I didn't believe you because the first one you spotted was black, and cephalids have always been blue. But I guess if you're an Obscura, you could be black cephalids.
Absolutely. I don't know why we wouldn't. I'm in for some sweet cephalid action. That sounds dirty. I didn't mean it to be dirty. The next one is the Maestros. This is classically the Grixis colors. This is very oriented around sacrifice. Surprise, surprise. You guys will notice that the classic color orientation of all of these houses doesn't seem to branch out a ton from what we would normally see in anything that would be considered, you know, Esper, Grixis, John Naya, and Bant end up being the main colors. There is some nice overlap here where you get a lot of extra creatures to sacrifice. But for the most part, we're just looking for sacrifice, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rakdos part of this color combination is going to be very heavy sacrifice. You see in the card here with Carmella a little bit more of the maybe like Demir aspect to this uh, house with still referencing the graveyard, still death triggers, which are certainly relevant for sacrificing, but dealing with getting instants and sorceries back or casting them. So you can see how those two color pairs can kind of work together into a nice 3-color house.
Yeah, I'm feeling like the black and blue are going to be having most of the sacrifice abilities. The Casualty, which is one of the new mechanics we'll get to here in just a little bit. And a lot of the things we're going to be sacking when in these colors specifically is going to be the little red dirtles probably. We have the next one that we're going to talk about is the Riveters. This is classically the Jund. And this archetype or wedge is known for the aggressive and also a heavy sack theme because it still has those Rakdos colors. What's going to end up happening is you're going to end up being like in a 1-2 color. So let's say you're Rakdos, you could splash the green in the Cabretti, which would make you a little bit more go wide and treasure, or you could splash the blue and end up getting a little bit more card draw and sacrifice options. So it really just kind of depends. I think we're mostly going to end up in 2 colors splash, which could definitely change your deck.
Yeah, I think here, looking at Riveters, you see with Crew Captain right here, feels like every creature in this shard has haste. Or can be given haste with Blitz, its signature ability that we'll talk about later. So you need to be careful when playing against these decks because they're going to hit for a lot out of nowhere.
Yeah, and this is another one of those situations where you could be more Gruul and then decide to splash the black, but the Gruul can also go into a different direction, like with the Naya. So you're going to be getting a lot of these haste creatures in the red with Blitz mechanic, but you're also going to be getting a lot of the sacrifice in the Rakdos colors. So having a deck that is very set on the synergy it wants to do actually might be quite difficult because they might be trying to do opposite things. For example, if you have a ton of aggro and Blitz cards in your red, but you end up with a lot of black cards that are more interested in sacrificing, it could be kind of counterintuitive. So I think that's going to make drafting a lot more difficult than usual.
Yeah, I do think you're going to run into those scenarios. Now, the good thing with this like Jund Riveters set is because the Blitz ability we'll talk about later involves a creature dying anyway. It's a nice fodder for that sacrifice theme.
That's certainly true. All right, so we have one more creature to talk about here for the Riveters, and that just says, whenever you attack, double target creature's power until end of turn. So again, this is that sort of more aggressive thing that we're seeing, focused in probably the Gruul colors, but just in Riveters in general.
Yeah, again, this is a great card for these haste creatures that are going to hit out of nowhere. Even a 3-power haste creature is now 6 damage out of nowhere, with that on the battlefield. So it's going to be a very dangerous archetype to play against.
All right, so the next one we have is the Cabretti. This is the classical Naya colors. This is going to focus on the go wide, creature heavy idea. And then we're also going to have a lot of treasure show up in this, which is interesting. I wouldn't expect Naya to be where we find our treasures, but it does seem to have a lot of cards that do that, especially in the Gruul colors specifically. So here we've got the second card I wanted to put. Ooh, maybe I messed this up. I might have messed up the order. Oh, I lied. We're going to do that later. So this creature is a Vigilance. Again, we'll do the ratings a little bit later, so don't worry about that. But it just shows how different these Naya cards are from what we've seen so far in the first 3 houses, right?
Yeah, Naya Cabaretti is very much about going wide, putting a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. This lets you get more creatures, so does Rocco Cabaretti Caterer. There's things that trigger off creatures coming into play. Like, it just wants creatures. So I probably won't be playing it very much.
I will. Getting to play a creature and getting a replacement card in any form, even if it's just like usually a token, it ends up being pretty busted. So this, I think, is going to be an interesting one, and I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out. The next one, I think, is a little funky. I don't know how to rate this. The next is the Brokers, the classically Bant colors here. So they focus on protection with a new mechanic called Shield Counters. or keyword. And they also have a ton of focus on creatures because of the way their abilities work. So the one you can see here on the screen, the Duelist, it does have double strike, and it also enters the battlefield with a shield counter, which again we'll describe here next as soon as we finish these counters. But you are going to be focusing a ton on building a huge board, building solid, strong creatures with double strike and so on, and then protecting them with their own counters and other spells as well.
Yeah, I think both the Brokers and Cabaretti are definitely be very creature focused. I'm curious to see if Brokers maybe plays a little bit more going tall Voltron-y with putting counters on things and then protecting them with the shield counters. I'll be curious to see if that's actually how that plays out or not.
I think that's true. I think that the red is going to be the go wide idea because you've got the Blitz ability where you're going to be getting cards, in return. And then I do think that this Brokers is going to be a lot more focused on the green side of things. All right, so we're going to be moving on here, guys. We are done talking about the various houses and the different gang families that are associated with the plane of New Capenna. Let's talk about the new mechanics that you guys are going to be seeing here for the first time. There's actually quite a few of them, and they're pretty interesting. I like that they are mixing things up and giving us new mechanics in small, bite-sized pieces. So first, let's go ahead and talk about Alliance. It's basically whenever a creature ETB effects on a creature that's already on the board. So this particular one says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, X. In this case, it's put a +1/+1 counter on it, but this will change from creature to creature, whatever it may do. Could be vastly different. So having cards that trigger, maybe bounce or come back or do something, create tokens, because it doesn't say cast either, it's just an ETB. So if you have anything that's producing tokens, you're going to be getting multiple of these Alliance triggers.
Yeah, this is the Cabaretti signature mechanic. Whenever we get this sort of shard, house, guild focus set, you generally get, a mechanic for each of the respective houses, schools, whatever you want to call them, in this case, houses. And yeah, Alliance is very simple. It's an ability word. Doesn't mean anything on its own. It just basically tells you that whatever coming up next is going to be a creature ETB trigger.
Yep. I would say this also could be an interesting thing for the Brokers too, if the Brokers have any way of giving the shield that we saw, the shield counters. So building up these taller creatures might be quite interesting in the Brokers as well. But again, we'll talk more about that in the future videos this week with the set review. The next, guys, is Casualty. This is sort of the Maestros main mechanic, and this was actually my preview card. So shout out to Wizards for giving us the sweet free preview. So we have Casualty is a special ability that allows you to sacrifice another creature when this comes into play, power 2 or greater for a bonus effect. In this case, it's basically making a copy of a larger creature. So you're switching out your 2/2 soldier token and turning it into a 4/3 for sacrificing it.
Yeah, a few things with this ability that are a little rulesy. You're getting a copy, right? You're not casting the copy, so it doesn't trigger anything that would be like if you cast an instant or sorcery. The second one will not do that. It goes on the stack as a copy, so it can be countered. And you can only sacrifice one creature. You can't sacrifice two creatures that together, like 2 1/1s in this case.
Like a crew mechanic.
Creature. Exactly, yeah, it works differently than that. It's a single creature with power, X or greater.
Yep. So some of these, I think, be a little careful. Sometimes the upgrade might not be an upgrade. So playing your stuff in the correct order is going to be super important. But yeah, this is an interesting mechanic, and I'm excited to see how this sort of built-in exploit type mechanic works in the set.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's interesting that we have this coming on the back of having exploit not that long ago.
Yep. So now we have Connive. I keep saying convene. When I look at the word, I see convene, and that's not correct. So we have Connive, which is the Obscura house mechanic. This basically just lets you do some sort of loot. So you can pay 3, you can connive, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discarded a non-land card, put a +1/+1. So this is a sort of loot mechanic with a bonus. Now, I don't see as much Connive in the format as we're seeing things like Casualty, Alliance, and Blitz, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, I haven't looked enough through the cards yet to see that, but I mean, looting mechanics are always good. They're really good in limited because it just helps you dig for lands. Um, depending on how they're not in this case, right? You already have to have 3 mana, but there can be some, kind of like a scry or a surveil type effect can help you dig for lands or dig through lands that you don't want anymore.
Yeah, I find more often than not in limited, I'm interested in removing my lands at the end of the game. By the time I've played this and we have 3 extra mana to dump into a basically do nothing turn, I tend to have as much mana as I want. So I find this to be a redraw card advantage mechanic to be able to outpace your opponent by not drawing lands anymore. All right, the next one is the Blitz mechanic. This is going to be seen a lot in the Riveters. We talked about it a little bit before. It's play a creature for an alternate cost, and it gives it haste, and then at the end of the turn you can sacrifice it and draw. So this kind of gives you the ability to sacrifice the creature to something else. Sometimes the Blitz is the same price, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on what the creature itself does. But you can also sacrifice it to one of the Connive triggers, but then you miss out on the Blitz draw card, right?
No, because it's whenever this creature dies, you draw a card.
Oh, I thought it said at the end of turn, sacrifice it, draw a card. Oh, so you're going to get extra value out of this. So this is beautiful in the Maestros sack options.
Yeah, I mean, Blitz is reminiscent of, if anybody remembers, Dash from Fate Reforged, or on our favorite recently banned everywhere Monkey and Ragavan, or at least banned in Legacy. Except in that case, right, it would come back to your hand. In this case, it replaces itself, or like you're saying, you can sacrifice it for extra value.
Yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting mechanic. Oftentimes, I find that in some limited formats, when you're bouncing too many things to your hand, you can oftentimes tempo yourself out of the game, even if you're getting card redraw. It just depends on how quick the format is. But yeah, I'm interested to see how Blitz plays out.
It also functions a little bit as like a delayed cycling. If you're just trying to get rid of a spell that the card that really doesn't have any use anymore.
Yeah,
depending on the mana cost, of course.
And if you're expecting them to make some sort of trade and it dies, you get to draw. That's super valuable.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so now we have the Disciplined Duelist. This is the broker colors, and this focuses on the new shield counters ability. So this is whenever the creature enters the battlefield, it enters with a shield counter on it. And that basically says whenever this creature would be dealt damage or destroyed, remove the shield counter. So this works if you guys have ever seen any of the Hearthstone cards that have bubble. They actually have this thing where any amount of damage gets absorbed the first time, including, I don't know if Hearthstone does destroy spells like this one will, but it's a very similar mechanic in that the first time this thing would take any damage, you get to remove that from the stack essentially and get to keep your creature around.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Hearthstone, so I can't speak to that. But one interesting thing with this card, with shield, with this mechanic, is that they can stack. You can have several shield counters, and if you take damage or destroyed, it only removes one of them.
Yep.
So you can put 3-4 shields on something big, and they're gonna have to kill it 4 times or deal damage to it 4 times. So that's a little bit of a downside. Is like you could have like a 9/9, but 1 damage will pop a shield counter.
Yes, so they can chump it with their squirrel and remove your counter, and then the next time kill it with something, which is pretty interesting. So you do have to be a little bit careful. This one, for example, has double strike, so keep in mind, like if your opponent has shields as well, you could possibly be removing 2 of those shields or popping it with the first strike damage and then doing the next thing. So, that is going to be quite interesting as well to see how double strike works with this mechanic. Or first strike with a removal spell, right?
Yeah, I was just saying, I was thinking about that, or just first strike in general, how, your shield won't get popped if you deal damage first. So
that's certainly true.
So
yep. So you could possibly use this, crack their shield with a first striker, and then remove it with some sort of white removal spell. The other thing is you can also just stack a bunch of things on a creature. Like, let's say you get 5 shields. It sounds great. Your creature's never going to die, and then they have an exile spell. That would work, right? That would be...
Yeah, or a -X/-X spell.
Definitely true. So this is going to work very similarly to like Indestructible in that way, where Exile and minus spells can indeed break that. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about returning mechanics. Now, Hideaway is a mechanic many of you guys might not know is a returning mechanic, but it indeed was. Yanks, what set was it in again?
Yeah, so Hideaway was originally in Lorwyn, and it only on a set of 5 rare lands, and it came back in, I believe it was Modern Horizons 2, but it might have been the original Modern Horizons on, I believe, only one card that I can think of, which was a creature. Hideaway now works a little different than it did. The card most people might know Hideaway from is Shelldock Isle, which is a major cube card. Those cards would just say Hideaway. They didn't have a number on them. And it automatically meant 4 cards, and it automatically meant when the land, in that case, came into play tapped. They've changed that a bit, so now it's Hideaway X, or N, I believe they call it, so whatever the number on the card is. And the permanent doesn't come into play tapped unless it says otherwise, unless it specifically says so.
That's still an interesting change.
Yeah. Not entirely sure why they did that, but this is a little more straightforward. You don't have to assume you know some things about it.
Did they go back and change how the original Hideaway works, or do we just have 2 versions of Hideaways depending on what you're playing now?
No, if they reprinted those would all say Hideaway 4, and they'd have a separate line of text that says, Shelldock Isle enters the battlefield tapped.
Okay, so they did rework it, unlike the Night and Day mechanic, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so that is funky for like werewolves. So this one did actually go back and get changed, which I think is the correct play here. So the next one we're going to talk about, guys, is simple Return of Ward. This is something that we'll probably stop talking about here in the next set or 2, because we are seeing it on at least 1 card in every single set. So it's now becoming more evergreen than it ever was before. But pretty simple, you can't touch it or target it in any way unless you pay the ward cost. Sometimes that's discarding a spell, sometimes that's taking 3 damage. In this case, it's paying an additional 2 mana for the privilege of touching this card.
Nah. Can't touch this. Nah.
Only if you have an extra 2 mana. Another straightforward one you guys won't be surprised about is the vehicles. We are actually starting to see more and more vehicles, and coming from Kamigawa, where we had plenty of them. Most of you should be familiar with it, but if you're just coming back, this is a vehicle that is not a creature on its own, even though it does have a power and toughness, and it has a crew cost. This is often, different from vehicle to vehicle, and what the crew cost means is you must tap 1 creature with power equal to the crew or greater. That creature essentially jumps into the vehicle, and the vehicle can drive an attack. So it's a cool mechanic, but getting less and less unique. So you guys will see a lot more of this in the future, I think.
Yeah, it feels like they're just putting a vehicle or 2 in every set, and some sets, when it fits the theme, will have more, especially any sort of urban set like this or Kamigawa or a Ravnica type thing.
So this was once something we would see, once in a blue moon, but it's getting to be a lot more like Ward, where we're getting 1 or 2 in almost every set, and it's getting to be more of a common theme. Another thing that is becoming more and more common, which we saw in only like 1 set and then it kind of like disappeared for a while and came back, is treasures. We actually have one of the houses, the Cabaretti, which actually focuses on a lot of treasure generation, and then those treasures can be used for things like creating more creature tokens. For example, with the Black Market Tycoon here, which is a rare, but you can tap to create a treasure, and it deals 2 damage for each treasure you control. So that's a big freaking deal, right? This is going to get bigger and bigger each time. You can crack your treasures, and then you can use it for something like this stimulus package, which says sacrifice a treasure, create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So it's going to make sure you get a lot of treasures, and it's going to make sure you have things that you want to do with them. So it's going to be a highly synergistic deck.
Yeah, treasure's been around since Ixalan and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. The little bit I've seen of this set, it does feel like there's more treasure than we've seen in a while, especially with Cabaretti in particular. The Gruul portion of Cabaretti and Riveters really focusing on treasure tokens.
That is certainly true. Okay, guys, so that is the end of us talking about the different houses, the different, gangster themes, and what you expect to see with all the different color archetypes, as well as the old and new mechanics to be found in Streets of New Capenna. But as promised, the last thing I wanted to tell you guys about is these free sleeves that you guys can get for your account right now. You can, I'll post it in, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll post the names of the codes in the description below. If you guys are watching here on Twitch, I'll post them in the channel there for you. But the codes are read the fine print. Again, these you just put them on the top right of the store, and there's no spaces. And then fun isn't free. The joke is kind of that is the theme of Arena, so seems reasonable. Always finish the job. Crime is an art form, and information is power. So you guys can put those into your store. It's already active. This was a special that Wizards did in the Magic Community Discord, and you get 5 free sleeves. So that's great. And they did something very similar with Strixhaven. If you guys didn't get those, you guys could look those up too. All right, Yanks, moment of truth. What house are you?
Obscura. I think that's pretty clear.
I don't know. Maybe you throw us a curveball once in a while or something.
I mean, it could be Maestros. I do play a lot of Grixis, but not like a sacrifice form, just like ever. It's like always a controlling style, so I think that fits more in the Obscura than the others.
I'm actually kind of Obscura myself, surprisingly. I tend to like the tempo side of blue, and I like removal and things. And I was a really big fan of like the original Orzhov, like the drain mechanics. I tend to like my creatures doing that. I like the longer, grindier games, which I think Obscura is going to have.
Let's say, by the way, speaking of that, how do we have a gangster set without Extort in the set?
Agreed. I think that's a big flavor miss. But,
really? I mean, it's perfect. Why is that not there?
Well, I mean, they said the same thing when we have the blood tokens, and they wanted madness, which maybe it's just too much. I don't know. Maybe it's too close to home, too on the nose. I don't know. But I do think that would have been great. Extort, yeah. Definitely some flavor there that they missed out on. Some chat saying Maestros for the win. So we got people on all sides of this one. All right, so that's the end of our introduction to Streets of New Capenna. Leave us a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the set. And if you guys come back, I believe the day after tomorrow, then we will start producing the set review where we go over every single card in the set from a limited standpoint, giving them a rating between 1 and 5. So that way you guys will have all the information you need going into your local pre-releases on the 22nd, as well as MTG Arena on the 28th. It will be live. Also expect to see me posting some videos in some like flapper girl dresses, because I'm kind of all about this 1920s sort of gangster floozy vibe. I'm all for it. Let's do it. What do you think, Yanks? You gonna wear a suit for us?
Oh God, I look ridiculous wearing a suit.
I'm gonna wear like a sparkly bandana and flapper girl fluffies. I'm doing it. Don't care. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video when we do our white set review. Have a good night.